Like always, appreciate everybody getting on and covering and supporting Penn State football. I just realized it's a beautiful day out there. Hopefully that continues the rest of the week. Quick summary of the Maryland game. We won the turnover battle. That was great. Obviously, I think everybody knows how much we emphasize that and work on that. We lost the penalty battle. And then when you talk about drive start battle, which I think was a major factor in the game, we lost that. We won the sack battle from a yards perspective. The explosive play battle, we won that. I think that was obviously another major factor in the game. And overall, we were, happy to be able to get a win on the road against, I think, a talented football team. A couple other, kind of summary positives. Obviously, number one, we got the win. We won the turnover battle, the explosive play battle. When you talk about the specifics, Penn State, we were at 10%. Maryland was at 5.88%. I think that's the lowest that we've had this year on the defensive side of the ball, which was great. I thought we played complementary football, which was important. We scored on defense, and I did want to mention, I thought Jesse Laquetta and John Sutherland's leadership on the sideline and in the locker room was significant. And we talk all the time about guys having roles and embracing their roles. That was their role on Saturday based on their ability or not ability to play in the game. That had a big factor. Areas for growth. We must be better with field position, drive start. The penalties and punting for the first time factored into the game there. And then again, to reinforce the penalties, we got to eliminate those penalties. We're giving away too many first downs. We obviously had a huge turnover in the game, and I'm not sure if you guys know this or not. I'm not sure how it was covered on TV, but they actually called us for two separate penalties. So it went half the distance and then half the distance again. So it went from a huge momentum play to having the ball backed up. So we got to get those things cleaned up for sure. Obviously, moving on to Michigan, I think the first thing I'd like to say is we need this place rocking on Saturday. 12 o'clock start. The breakfast and brunch tailgating will be phenomenal. We need everybody into the stadium as early as possible, and then it's going to create a great opportunity post-game to continue tailgating and enjoying yourself. So challenge all the students and all the fans to get into that stadium as early as possible. Obviously, it's going to be pretty cool in talking about the most iconic helmet in all of football. It hasn't changed. It doesn't need to change. And having the helmet stripe game in the stadium is something that's new and hopefully could be cool for us. Obviously, Coach Harbaugh and University of Michigan got tremendous respect for the university and the history and traditions there. What Coach Harbaugh's been able to do, obviously, as a Letterman and alumni. Josh Gaddis, their offensive coordinator. Obviously, everybody on this call knows that me and Josh go way back. From our time at Vanderbilt as well as our time at Penn State. He's the offensive coordinator. The guys we've been impressed with is their two running backs, Hassan Haskins and Blake Corum, number 25 and number 2, and then Cornelius Johnson, number 6. We know these guys pretty well, not only from what we've studied on tape, but also in recruiting, specifically Corum and Johnson. And then Mike McDonald, the defensive coordinator, who came from the Baltimore Ravens. Been impressed with how they're playing on defense. I think it really starts with their two defensive ends. David Ojabo, who we know very well, went to the same high school as Jason Owe. They list him as a linebacker, linebacker / D end in my mind. And then obviously Aiden Hutchinson, 6'6", 265 pounds, number 97 for them, playing at a really high level. Both of those guys, and then their nickel, Daxton Hill, who seems like he's been playing there forever, and then their corner, Vincent Gray, number 4. So those guys stand out. And then Jay Harbaugh is the special teams coordinator. They do a good job on special teams. They play aggressive. especially when it comes to punt return and trying to block kicks. Been impressed with number 13, Jake Moody, their kicker. Has been really efficient, 91% field goal percentage. And then returners, A.J. Henning and Blake Corum, one is a punt returner, one is a kick returner, and then their punter, Brad Robbins, is doing a nice job as well. So talented football team like Michigan always is. And it's going to be a tremendous challenge and a tremendous opportunity come Saturday, and that's why we need everybody in that stadium and to create a challenging environment so we can find a way to be 1-0 together. So open up the questions.
Mark Brennan, Lions 247 with Fight on State, and then Greg Pickle.
Hey, James, thanks for your time today.
Hey, Mark, you too.
Hey, a signing day is about a month away. I wonder what your priorities are between now and then, and how much of a balancing act is it between keeping the kids you have committed happy, maybe adding a couple pieces, and then looking ahead to 23, 24, and beyond?
Yeah, I'd say the priority for us is keeping the 22 class, intact with the guys that are doing what they need to do to come to Penn State. We obviously have some early enrollees, a large number of early enrollees as well. And then obviously the 23 class. I think there could be a little bit, of movement in the 22 class, but we also want to have a little bit of flexibility for some possible transfers as well. But our focus is keeping the 22 class intact, and those guys have a really strong relationship, not only with each other, but also with our staff and their parents. And then obviously doing a great job in the 23 class. And we got a pretty good start on that already, and we're going to need to continue building this. I think that's obviously a major focus for us is continuing to recruit at a high level. We've had some really good recruiting classes, but we need to be able to stack them up one after another. So that'll be obviously a big focus. We got to be able to balance finishing the season the right way and recruiting at the same time.
Greg Pickle, Blue White Illustrated, then Audrey Snyder.
Hey, Coach. Good afternoon. How are you?
Good, Greg. How are you, man?
I'm doing well. Thanks for your time. At this point, I believe Jalen Reed's played in 4 games. So what is your plan with him moving forward in terms of redshirting or not? And then are there any other guys who have either played this season or have not played this year that you might be at a point of being willing to play, that you're now at the point of 4 games left and able to still redshirt them but also get them some snaps?
Yeah, Jalen is probably the main one. We're gonna play him. He wants to play. He's ready to play. We need him on special teams. We need him in some of our defensive packages as well. I think that'll help him moving forward for next year as well. Football makes sense to him. He's a football smart guy. He's obviously a physical guy. You guys have seen flashes of that as well, and he can run. So we're very high on Jalen. There's some other guys that could fall into that category, but they're not right now. But he's probably the main one in terms of a conversation that needs to have with you guys. Obviously, we have some injuries. Some of those things could change, but we do try to obviously keep track and be aware of where they're at in terms of number of games. Like I said in the beginning of the year, we'd love to be able to save one of those games for either a late season injury or bowl game, or when needed. So that's where we're at this point. And there may be somebody else, Greg, if I think about it after we get on this call. I'll have Chris send you a message, but he's probably the one that jumps out the most to me, and we discussed it this morning in the staff meeting.
Audrey Snyder, The Athletic, then Donnie Collins.
Hey, James, good afternoon.
You as well, Audrey.
I wanted to ask you about Fred Hansard. We saw his statement last night. Have you guys heard anything from the conference in terms of disciplinary measures, or do you guys plan to do anything internally? And what kind of was your reaction to that?
Yeah, I guess the first thing I would say, I didn't know about it until after the game. I was not aware at all. And then I saw the clip. And obviously the optics of it don't look great. But I do want to say this. Fred Hansard's been here for 4 years. He has been a model citizen and a model student athlete. He's a super impressive young man that's going to go on and do great things, got a great mom and dad. So, just like in his statement that he put out, I know the optics of it don't look great, but I don't think Fred had any intentions, I don't think he had any intentions to do anything to hurt another player or anything like that. I think it was a reaction. But at the end of the day, it's not a good look, right? So the Big Ten did reach out to us and asked us what we were doing. We were going to suspend Fred for the first half of the game. And obviously Fred wanted to put out a statement to make sure that, Maryland, as well as Rashid Walker, who I guess Chris told me, some people thought it was Rashid during the game. He wanted to clean those things up as well. But again, Fred's been a class act since he got here. But I also understand, when something like that happens and it doesn't look good, there needs to be a reaction. But I hope everybody understands that that's not who Fred Hansard is. And I want everybody to remember the 4 years and all the great things that he's done both on and off the field and as a student athlete.
Donnie Collins, Times Tribune, then Rich Scarcella.
How you doing today, James?
Hey, Donnie.
Hey, so earlier this morning, Jahan Dotson said that when he watches film, he'll often find 50, 60 yards that he could have had that he left on the field if he had done something a little bit differently. What's it say about his drive? And how do you think he could improve to actually become a better player than he is right now?
Well, I hope everybody in our program is like that. The coaches, the players, the off the field staff, everybody. I hope we're always trying to find ways to get better. That is the right mentality and that is the right approach. I think what Jahan's talking about is there's probably some routes in each game, that he feels like, he could have done a little bit better job on his release. He could have done a little bit better job at the top of his route, selling a corner when he's running a post or vice versa. I think it's all those types of things. I think it's opportunities for more yak yards and being able to break some tackles, pull his feet out, stiff arm, swipe the hands down, whatever it may be. I think he watches the film and sees, if I could just pull my feet out of that tackle, it was man coverage and I got an opportunity to make bigger plays. So I think it's that. I also think it's when he runs his routes, when the ball doesn't come to him, to make sure it's opening up opportunities for other guys. And I think that's something that we talk about is, I think you can show your love for the program and your teammates, with what you do when the ball's not in your hands, right? I think that's really important. So, I think that's what Jahan is talking about. I think one of the areas that Jahan has really helped himself since arriving is getting bigger and stronger and more explosive. I think he's done a really good job of that since he's arrived at Penn State. But I don't know if he's getting talked about enough, in my opinion.
Rich Scarcella, Reading Eagle, and then John Sauber.
Hi, James. How are you today?
Good, Rich. How are you, buddy?
I'm all right, thank you. James, why do you think your red zone defense has been so effective, and was it an off-season priority with you and Brent?
Yeah, off-season priority for sure. I would say that we do it every single year, but obviously it's probably been a little bit more impactful this year. I think the other thing is I think we've done a better job of recruiting and developing length in the back end. We are longer, in the secondary when you talk about, the body types of our safeties, the body types of our corners, even the body types of our linebackers. You think about that play Brandon Smith made where he got his hand up and tipped the ball and was almost picked off. We've talked about this in the past. There's a lot of ways to reduce space on defense. Obviously, one way is with speed, to be able to close windows or stay in man coverage, but also the length is important. Having two corners over 6 foot, two safeties over 6 foot, all of our linebackers over 6 foot and one at 6'4". I think those things help as well. And then obviously, I think our sack totals, our numbers may be down, but I think we've done a better job of having rush discipline. So we're not giving up the big plays on screens. We're not giving up the big scrambles by quarterbacks, because I think we're much more disciplined in the pocket. And that was really a shift in when John came in here. Had a lot of discussions, and that was going to change whether John came in or not. And I think that's helped us as well. So I think it's a combination of all those things. And then I think we're getting good work, offense versus defense, every single week, good on good in the red zone as well. So I think it's a combination of factors, Rich, but I do think the length has been helpful.
John Sauber, Center Daily Times, then Mike Gross, LNP News.
Good afternoon, James.
Hey, John.
You mentioned Josh Gaddis earlier, and obviously you're familiar with him. How similar is the offense he's running at Michigan to the one that he sort of learned under while he was with you?
Yeah, I think probably in years past, it probably was similar. I think this year there's been a change. Obviously, very early in the season where they were heavy run. And I think it was probably a blend of what Josh, has done, both at Penn State and at Alabama. And then also, obviously, I think this offseason, with things that Coach Harbaugh had done in his past, specifically probably at Stanford. So I think there's probably a little bit more of an influence of that than Josh has shown in the past. And I think it's been a good blend for them, especially with the tight ends that they have, the backs that they have, and with the offensive line that they have. I think it's been a good blend. It's served them well, specifically early in the year, and I think they've opened it up a little bit since then.
Mike Gross, LNP News, then Ben Jones.
Good afternoon, James. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Michigan under the previous defensive coordinator seemed to me to be very man-to-man oriented in terms of coverage. How are they different now? And also in terms of what do you think teams are going to try to do now to negate Jahan a little bit, because he has so much impact on the game?
Yeah, I still think, it's a decent amount of man coverage. I think the thing that probably really differentiates them right now is having two defensive ends that can cause real problems for people. I mean, you watch that Michigan State game, both of those defensive ends showed up with huge plays. And when you're able to have a guy on either side, that becomes real challenging. You have to decide how you're going to deal with both of them. So I think that's a big factor for them. And then, I think the other thing I would say when it comes to Jahan, obviously, people are going to have a plan for him, and whether that is bracket or whether that is, clouding and having a high safety over to his side. But again, the fact that we move him around, we line him up at number 3, we line him up at number 2, we line him up at number 1, that can be challenging. That makes it difficult. And then when you motion him as well, he's just in a lot of different spots, which make it a little bit more challenging than a guy that always lines up in a slot, or a guy that always lines up at the single receiver in a 3-by-1 set, whatever it may be. So that's obviously intentional on our part as well. But I also think, there's some concerns when Parker had over 100 yards the previous game. And Keandre continues to show growth and flashes as well. So, and our tight ends, so it's, when you have one guy and no other threats, no different than the discussion we're having with the defensive ends, then it becomes a little bit more manageable. But when you have multiple guys that can hurt you, if they decide to invest that much of their resources into one guy, then it could be challenging.
Ben Jones, StateCollege.com, then Elton Hayes.
Hey, James, how's it going?
Good, Ben. How are you?
Good. I got my booster, so I'm a little sore, but otherwise.
I did too yesterday. I didn't have any issues. But I know a lot of people did, based on how they reacted to the first 2 shots. But fortunately, I didn't have any. But I got mine yesterday.
Awesome. I realize that competitively you approach every week the same way, and preparation-wise you approach it every week the same way. But from an information gathering standpoint, how do these sorts of games compare to, maybe a game that's not against a top 10 team, not against a top 15, when it comes to gathering information about your team this year and maybe long-term information about the program at large?
I'm not sure if I'm completely understanding your question, Ben. I'm sorry.
I guess I would just say that there's a different benchmarking that comes against comparable programs in the Big Ten compared to maybe playing somebody in out of conference or somebody else in the Big Ten.
I got
do
you.
Learn in weeks like this.
I got you. Okay, that's fair. So it's interesting. One of the things I was shocked by, to kind of answer your question, one of the things I was shocked by is the amount of times that we had played Michigan. Me and Chris Peterson were talking about this today, and I was kind of shocked that we'd only played them 24 times. In my mind, that number would have been much larger than that. And then I try to kind of look at before we arrived, what was our record against, Michigan, what was our record against Ohio State, to your point, from a benchmarking standpoint, to have an idea. Because I do think, when you're trying to benchmark and you're trying to compare, the data that is specific to the Big Ten, I think is important. I think that's fair. Obviously, we want to make sure that we put our players and our program in the best position to be successful week in and week out. Consistency is also really important, but also obviously games against, what people would consider the better, more consistent programs in the conference. And then specifically when you're on the East, in our side of the conference, again, which is different because, I think, before we got here, there was a period of time when you had the legends and the leaders. Is that correct, Chris? I think is what it was called. And that was a very different makeup of how the conference was constructed. So I think all those things factor in, but I think your point is a fair one. And, being able to play well and finding ways to get wins against a program, like the University of Michigan with all their history and tradition is really important.
Elton Hayes, CNHI Pennsylvania, then Daniel Gallen.
Hey, James, how are you this afternoon?
Good. How are you?
Good. I want to ask you about Malik Mega. Got his first career catch against Maryland. It's a guy who worked back from injury earlier this season. Where do you see his role, or how do you see his role unfolding for the second half of the back end of this season here?
Yeah, we'd love that to continue to grow. He's an awesome kid. He's got a lot of things that we look for in the recruiting process. I mean, he is big and strong and fast. One of the faster players we have on the team, one of the tallest receivers that we have in the program right now. And him and Parker are like best friends. They're constantly together, whether it's on the jugs machine or working in pre-practice or post-practice. They're always together, and it's interesting because they have different skill sets. So I think it's good for them to learn from each other and challenge each other. But I think he has a chance, the rest of the season and long term, to be that type of home run threat for us, a guy that can really take the top off the coverage and try to get him involved that way. So I have a lot of faith and very encouraged about Malik and his growth since he's been here. And he's one of the more likable, one of the more popular guys on our team.
Daniel Gallen, Penn Live, then Corey Geiger.
Good afternoon, James.
Hey, Daniel.
You've been pretty complimentary of Jair Brown throughout this season. Him getting Big Ten Defensive Player of the Week honors. How have you just kind of seen his development throughout the season to get to this point with those kinds of impact plays on Saturday?
It's interesting. I was talking to Coach Duda last night, and he calls from time to time to check on those guys, or I call to him to kind of give him updates. And one of the things that really just jumps out about Jair and really also Briskers, those guys they love football. They love it. They're committed to being great. They both have a maturity to them where they're great teammates, with their peers, but they also have a really good way with the coaches and know when to have fun and mess around and when it's time to work and lock in. To me, with Tig, his confidence has really skyrocketed this year, in his ability to make plays, to get his hands on balls, to create turnovers, has been dramatic. And he could have had a few more, let's be honest, both of those guys. But I just see his confidence growing as his experience grows. And he just continues to make plays and be around the ball. So, I think his future is very bright. I really do. I think him and Brisker have great chemistry together. I think Coach Poindexter, obviously being a guy that played the position at a very high level, both in college and in the NFL, and now is coaching the position. I'm not saying that's the end all be all. There's guys that can coach the position without ever playing it, but I do think there's some value there. And they've just worked really well together. So I also think about some of those young guys that are in backup roles that have two really good examples to learn from in front of them with Jair, who we call Tig, and also Brisker.
Corey Geiger, DK Pittsburgh Sports, then Joe Giuliano.
Hi, James.
Hey, Corey.
Sean has thrown 47 and 52 times the last two games. You got to do whatever it takes to win. But I'm just curious, that's just not what Penn State football has really ever been. And we ask you all these questions about the running game. Do you really have to run the ball, or are we in a situation now where you're okay throwing it 50 times and that's just maybe what Penn State fans are going to have to get used to?
Yeah, I guess for me, whatever we have to do to win, and that's going to be different year to year. That's going to be different game to game. I think the important thing that we've talked about before is I do think we took a positive step again in the run game on Saturday, but we have to continue to do that. And, I think the important thing is you can win by throwing it 50 times a game, but I also want us to be in a position that if we need to run the ball 30 times, 40 times in a game, that we can do that and still win. That's challenging for any offense to be able to do. But that's the ultimate goal. That is the ultimate goal. And I want us to make sure we're continuing to take steps in that direction, not only throughout the season, but also our time here. That's the ultimate goal, though, Corey, is to be able to do both at a really high level. And that's when you're really difficult to stop.
Joe Giuliano, Philadelphia Inquirer, then John Petishnock.
Hi, James.
Hey, Joe. How are you, buddy?
I'm good, thanks. How you doing?
Good.
You guys were very good in stopping the run against Maryland Saturday. Why were you so sharp and effective against them, and what kind of challenges does the Michigan running game present for you?
Yeah, I think we've done that pretty much all year, except for obviously the Illinois game. I think we've done a pretty good job of defending the run and trying to make people one-dimensional. That's something that Brent's done a pretty good job of, his entire time with me. Obviously that's going to be a challenge come Saturday, because I think that's a big part of their identity and who they are. They're massive up front with the O-line and the tight ends. They got a converted O-lineman playing tight end as well to serve in that role. They got a big back, that can hammer it in there. And then they have an undersized quick back that also does a great job of breaking tackles and plays with more power than you would think. So it's going to be a challenge. There's no doubt about it. But I think we're also going to get, some of the heavy sets. And obviously we've worked on that the last couple of weeks to make sure that we have a plan for that and have got enough reps working on it in practice, because I really expected to see that the last 2 weeks. So we've been working on it the last 2 weeks, and we're working on it again this week as well. But I think what it really just comes down to is having gap accountability. and fighting to keep your gap. And also being willing to get an extra guy into the box to defend the run with one of the safeties, or even a corner, whether it's a trap corner or whether you're bringing the corner off the edge to try to get another hat in the box to defend the run. Obviously, that causes some challenges in the secondary, but I also think we're playing pretty good in the secondary as well. So. We're gonna have to build on that, and that's something that's got to be a focus all week long.
John Petishnock, the football letter, and then Nate Bauer.
Hey, good afternoon, James. Hope you're doing well today.
Good, you as well, John. You're home today, not at the office, huh?
Yeah, just taking a personal day, but wanted to jump on the call and just taking care of some things from home.
I love it. Appreciate it.
Hey, after the Ohio State game, Joey Porter Jr. talked about Brent Pry and the defensive coaches having trust in him to go out there and make plays. And Joey also mentioned that he feels more comfortable on the field this year. How would you assess kind of the progress that he's made up to this point, and maybe what are the next steps for him moving forward?
Yeah, I think, what you see with Joey, he's got, elite, length in terms of, his body type and how tall he is and how long his arms are, and his ability to cover guys man to man. He's gotten much better in zone coverage, which was, I think, an emphasis in the offseason. And he's challenging routes. I think the next step for him, obviously, is to challenge those routes, but not put himself or the program at risk with some of the pass interference penalties. And that's a fine line, because when you're aggressive and you're challenging, you're going to get a few of them. So I think it's making sure that that we're coaching those things, that we're reinforcing those things in practice every single day, especially with the officials that we have at practice, but also not take that aggressiveness away from him. We want that. And then I think obviously the next step is for our corners to get their hands on some balls and turn them into some interceptions, which I think all of our corners have the ability to do. So he's done some great things, but I still think there's a lot of room left for growth with him, and I think he recognizes that as well. I think Saturday was a really good example. He did some great things, and I think there's some plays he'd like to have back.
Nate Bauer, Blue 8 Illustrated, then Ali Barubi.
Hey, James. How are you?
Good, Nate. How are you, man?
Good. Hey, kind of a two-parter for you. How would you assess your fourth down conversions offensively this season? And then does past success or failure impact your decision-making in an area like that?
Yes. Yes, it definitely impacts. It's interesting. So we each week on Sunday night, we sit down and we have a situational review where we go through pretty much every situation in the game and discuss, did we handle this the way we should have? What will we do different moving forward? Let's have a discussion about it. And then we also use an outside data analytics company that does that as well. It's interesting because if you talk to the analytics people, I've said this to you guys before, and it's not an exaggeration, they want you to go for it on every fourth down from 1 to 3, anywhere you are on the field, really. And I guess the data nationally supports that. But also, obviously, coaches are impacted by the success that you're having in those areas. And if you've tried it 2 or 3 times and haven't had the success, whatever the data tells you, you're less likely to do it moving forward. That's something that's important to me, especially when you get into the area of the field where if you don't pin them inside the 10-yard line and you punt it into the end zone like Maryland did a few times on Saturday, then you haven't really netted that many positive yards when you're just at a field goal range, maybe you could maybe go from the minus 45 to the plus 36, 38, somewhere in that range. So those things factor in, and then also how well is your defense playing? because being aggressive on offense and obviously having a chance to score touchdowns rather than punting or field goals have a big impact in the game. But then also, even if your defense does play well, then you may have put your offense in a backed up situation. So all these things you kind of have to factor in. It's interesting, Nate, because one of the discussions we had, which you guys all were asking me after the game, was the end of the half situation. You know, that's an interesting one, right? It's the end of the half. You know, you haven't played as well as you want to play in the first half. From a time perspective, they still had 3 timeouts. So if you throw the ball 2 of the 3 downs there, trying to be aggressive to go down and score in a 2-minute drive, and they use their timeouts, or you throw the ball and they conserve their timeouts on incompletions, you could put them in a situation where they could get the ball and get some points at the end of the half in the middle 8. So typically what you do there is you run the ball, hoping that you pop one into a light box, and then you can transition from a 4-minute mentality in terms of running the ball back into a 2-minute if you can get a chunk play. You know, then obviously, say, well, why do you call the timeout? Because we had moved the ball a little bit, and now you're in a decision. What do you want to do? Do you want to take a shot to the end zone? Do you do one of those Hail Mary or flea flickers where you throw the ball around? And typically at the end of the half, those aren't the right things to do. But that was the discussions, although it was received extremely well by the fans and the media. That's really kind of what went into that. But I think your point specifically about 4th down, I want to be aggressive in that area. But we also have to show our ability to pick up short yard situations more consistently.
Last 2 questions, Allie Bruby, ABC 27, and Bob Flounders.
Hey, Coach, how are you and your family doing?
You as well, Allie. We're good. Thanks for asking.
Good. I'm curious. We all made such a big deal about the 5-0 start, but how important is it to stack wins here at the end? And what does that do for the team as you're trying to close out the regular season?
Yeah, I guess a couple things. The first thing, obviously, is we were able to get some guys back from a health perspective, which has been really important for us, and we anticipate doing that again on Saturday. Being able to get a few guys back, which is really important. But yeah, being able to finish the season on a positive note is really important. Obviously, the game this weekend. And being at home and with a great supporting cast in the stands is going to be really important. But yeah, every win is important, and when you're able to stack them like we did in the beginning of the year with 5 straight wins, we want to try to do that every week. We want to try to do that throughout the entire season. And that's why it all matters, right? That's where the development matters, the scheme matters, the recruiting matters. It all matters because you're going to have injuries, and you better have depth, and you better put your players in the best position to be successful consistently week in and week out.
Last question, Bob Flounders, Penn Live.
Hi, James. How are you?
Good, Bob. How are you, man?
I'm good. James, you've mentioned.
Bob, what is that hat? I've been trying to figure that out.
Yeah, it's a Susquehanna Township.
I thought it was Susquehanna.
Football. Yeah, I know you got a guy on your team from there. It's real close to where I live.
Yeah, I think also it's a similar emblem as Susquehanna University. I think because that's where Alan Zamitis came from.
Township went 0-10 this year, so I'm hoping they're going to bounce back in 2022. I'm
Me
still
too.
representing them though.
I appreciate it. Me too.
James, you had talked about the impact of Michigan's defensive ends in games this year. 2 really disruptive players. So how would you assess the play of your starting tackles, Rashid and Caden, especially in pass protection?
Yeah, I think for the most part in pass protection, pretty good, especially based on the question I got earlier, based on how many times we're throwing the ball a game. I think pretty good. I think we need to be more consistent and more physical in the run game. I think that's something that will not only help our offense, but it will also help them when you can use the physicality of the run game to bang on guys. that maybe makes them less effective in the pass game. And so they're not just pinning their ears back and coming off that edge every single down. But overall, from a pass protection standpoint, I think pretty well. There's times obviously where we need to be firmer. There's times where we need to be better with our hands or our footwork and finishing and things like that. But, I think about a couple of those plays where Sean was able to step up in the pocket, hold onto the ball, which allowed Jahan those few extra seconds to work his route and come open, which led to obviously a big day. And those things go hand in hand. The quarterback's accuracy, the timing of the route, the protection, all of it goes hand in hand together in the scheme. So I think for the most part, solid. And I think where we really need to take a step is in the run game.
Thank you very much, Coach. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.